within 24 hours, that video had 3 million views, and God
Wow.
that prayer. It went all around the world. Just like BJ states, like, we never know how far reaching something we may think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. Well, I know what that quote means. It has a lot of significance. And it's like, if I can speak out, little BH Tapper, yahoo.com can speak out passionately. And I'm like, well, surely you can do it as well.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Dr. Heskett and Caroline with Coffee with the Chiro. We have a special guest with us today, Dr. Ben Tapper. Some of you may have seen him on television before. We'll talk about that in a few, but he is a good friend of mine as well as one of our speakers at the Chiropractic Revolution. He's been there before, and that was the first time I had an opportunity to get to know Dr. Ben and his family. We spent some amazing time together, both in the seminar and then afterwards in the pool. But he is a man of God, first of all. He loves the Lord, and he is a man of conviction, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But first and foremost, he is in Omaha right now, and which is very special. By the time this rolls out, we're going to know the end verdict. But around here in Knoxville parts, the University of Tennessee is 2-0 right now in the College World Series with a pretty good chance. They play again this Wednesday night, tomorrow night. Pretty good chance to take it all the way home. So, Dr. Ben, welcome to Coffee with the Chiro, and we're excited to have you and look forward to what God's going to do today. Caroline?
Oh.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Ben, for hopping on. I just want to reiterate what Dr. Michael said about the first time that we met, and also heard you speak at the Chiropractic Revolution. I think that was really when I was in the middle of doing my own research for my own family when it came to vaccines and big pharma and just natural holistic healthcare. And when I heard you speak, I wanted to just jump on the table at that point with a bullhorn and just be blasting to the masses what you were out there saying. So truly thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us today.
Well, thank you guys. God bless you, and thank you for the kind words. It means the world to me. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, let's just dive right in. First and foremost, what made you get into chiropractic care? How did your journey with chiropractic care start?
So that is a great question. My dad's a chiropractor. He graduated from Palmer in '75, and I was actually going into business, and I didn't really have my head on straight, and I was in party mode, and really, God really woke me up from an accident. I had an accident, and He saved my life, and I can go more into that detail here in a little bit. But really, He shook me up in a big way, got my attention, and I moved home. I wasn't really in the mindset of going to chiropractic school. I didn't really have my priorities right. And so I worked in a warehouse here in Omaha, and my dad gave me a book basically that talks about how God has a plan for us, a purpose for us. And really, I thought the book I really didn't take the book seriously, and I didn't take God seriously. And so it wasn't until I was working my butt off at this warehouse, working my tail off, and I was working for a guy that was micromanaging me, and I really read that book, and I'm like, man, I'm going to put this book to the test. And so I leaned into God. I leaned into His will for me, and I felt like He was calling me to chiropractic school. And so I went back to school, and I just, I had to learn how to study. I was not, I didn't really take school seriously, and so I really had to put my nose to the grindstone and learn how to study and get through it. And I like to say, if there's a will, there are 40 ways. And so, and I always tell docs below me, or just in general, but the most successful people, they don't really necessarily have an overabundance of knowledge. They have an overabundance of will. And so I got through chiropractic school, and that's where I'm at. So that's kind of how it led me to school. And I thank God for those humble beginnings and that warehouse. And I feel like the real world, and thankful to have that desire to go change my life. And I'm thankful.
And your families, because why don't you tell everybody about your beautiful family?
Yeah. So if you heard me speak, what you guys did, I always joke and say, I have a beautiful wife named Catherine, and the Lord has blessed us with 4 kiddos. I have Ophelia, Owen, Olson, and Oswin, and I always joke and say, yes, if we have one more, we'll name him Oops.
That's good. I
Yeah,
like that.
well, the Lord's, I'm the butt of that joke because the Lord has blessed us with another baby, so my wife is.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, you're pregnant,
yeah.
dude.
Okay.
That is so
I
exciting. You heard it
Yeah.
here. Heard it here first. Heard it here first. How far along, dude? That's exciting,
Right.
man.
So she's due in December. Yeah.
Oh,
When I
man.
joke, I joke all the time, like, yeah, if it's a boy, it's Oops. If it's a girl, it's Oopsie Daisy. Well, people are asking me, well, you can name it Oops. Well, no, we're not going to name it Oops. But but we were taking a parenting class, and the guy that's teaching the class, he's got 12 kids, and he's a Christian dude. He's homeschools, and he's like, he's like, if you ever just thought and wondered like how many kids God really wants you to have, and I was like, you know what, I never really thought about that, and so I just prayed, Lord, how many kids do you want me to have? Well, then a week later, my wife goes, hey, I'm pregnant. So I feel like that was an answer. I feel like that was an answered prayer, and it was the weirdest thing because every time the kids would come at dinner time, they would roll up and dinner, and even though they were all there, I was looking for the 5th one. I was like, okay, where's baby number 5? I just kept having this reoccurring feeling that we were going to have one more, and sure enough, we're going to have one more. So,
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so,
Well,
what are the ages?
So Ophelia's 13, Owen's 11, Olson's 8, Oswin is 6, and baby O, obviously in December. But I always joke I get to finally use that Jim Gaffigan quote because he's a comedian, and he's like, "What's it like having 5 kids? Imagine that you're drowning and someone throws you a kid." There's
That's good.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is so
Well,
cool.
I want to say that coming from someone who has 4, as you were telling the story, just recently, I will say that never when they were young, but now that they're 23, 21, 19, and 16, I should have had more. And I feel that, but so I want to confirm to you that you're not going to regret it, because I kind of regret not keep going, because the only real reason we said stop is because they were 8, 6, 4, and 1, and I said stop.
right.
But when they got older, I was like, man, I wish we'd had another. So congrats,
Thanks,
man.
brother.
Yeah.
We'll be praying for you and your wife. That is so awesome, dude. So
Thank
good.
you. Yeah, I feel blessed. It's an exciting time, so it's good. It'll be good.
That's amazing. And so, okay, so family, how you got started with chiropractic, and then shall we kick it off?
how you got in trouble?
Yeah, shall we kick it off and backtrack 4 years ago to when the pandemic started? And just so everybody knows as well, before you get into all this, what was going on in your life? Were you just day to day running a practice, husband, dad? Like, what was your day to day before the pandemic started?
So, I ran a clinic that we were, it was a thriving practice. We had a clinic in Omaha, right in like a hoity-toity area of Omaha. It's called the Wellness Point. And I was very passionate, about lecturing about wellness, and I would put on vaccine lectures prior to this. And if we back up even to in chiropractic school, I got into the political side of things when I campaigned for Ron Paul, and I voluntarily worked on his campaign trail, and I was a delegate for Ron Paul. I saw firsthand how much corruption there was in the political realm.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to censorship and stuff that was kept out of the masses and the public's eye, it was mind blowing. And things that you wouldn't even believe. It would sound like conspiracy, and you only really got to see that when you were in the political game as much as I was and as deep as I was. Like you would see, for an example, when Ron Paul won the CPAC in Texas, he won it, and people uproar and cheer, but what you heard was booing sounds what the mainstream media played. And so it was like, well, that's not what happened. And so you try to explain these things to people, and they would say, oh, that's just conspiracy. And then they would parrot the TV. And so it was really frustrating. So I got very much into this race and this political realm, thanks to Ron Paul. And so, and he would lecture about how, and he was a medical doctor for 40 years as well. And he talked about how there was so much corruption with the swine flu vaccine and all this stuff. And he said, don't believe it. Don't buy into the media scare. And so I really, I liked him. He had sound advice, and he had a lot of wisdom in that area. And so, we started Nebraskans for Medical Freedom in 2017 because we saw a lot of bills and draconian bills coming our way to take away our rights and freedoms to refuse a vaccine or a pharmaceutical. And so I was very much in that realm, in that race, and tried to educate people about how these people are manipulating data. They're coercing people to experimental vaccines because, I sat in a lecture with Dr. Burns, Richard Burns, back in 2008, and he was lecturing about the influenza vaccine and how they manipulate data to scare people and through the National Vital Reporting System. And basically, I would talk about how they manipulate data. They add, comorbidities in that data collection. Not only that, the average person that dies from so-called influenza, according to this chart, has comorbidities. They are on 13 plus medications, and 90% of the deaths are in the elderly. But they do not give that information out to the public. And to find this data, you really have to learn how to read this data that they put in there, and it's so easily manipulated. So that's what kind of kicked off prior to Crony Baloney and me speaking out. And, we held a lecture in 2019 about the bills and the stuff coming our way in 2019.
Right.
And that's what really put me on the map for, I think, the censorship. Well, actually, I think even Ron Paul put me on the map for being, hey, I'm a terrorist, according to the tyrant. But yeah, I mean, I can ramble on and tell the whole story, but that's kind of what leading up to the COVID pandemic.
Yeah. So let's just go to that morning. Let's go to that morning because our listeners, they don't know. A lot of them are patients. So let's go to that morning. I've heard the story, and I actually was just so everybody, all the listeners know, I was at the seminar, had Dr. Ben there. He got referred there by Dr. Ben Rawl. So I didn't really know the whole story until he put the video up. And then I had seen the video go viral because it was a chiropractor. So just start that day, that morning, kind of what you were doing and, what was happening and why you were going and exactly what happened so the listeners get an idea of what happened.
So the video he's referring to is a speech of the city council that was in August of 2020. Omaha, Nebraska was one of the last cities to have a mask mandate. And I like to think it was something with what we were doing and fighting back and pushing back against. Again, we started Nebraskans for Medical Freedom in 2017. And we were very, very vocal about, hey, this is a tyrannical agenda coming our way. Again, we held a seminar in 2019 in the fall. And I said, listen, something big is coming our way. I can't put my finger on it, but we have a lot of draconian bills and legislation coming our way, a tsunami of tyrannical legislation coming our way. And we have to be hyper diligent right now, more now than ever before. That was November of 2019, a month prior to COVID even hitting the world. Well, then January hit, and I said, listen, this is a Trojan horse to implement all this legislation. So in February of 2020, we held another seminar. And I said, listen, this is it. We need to be proactive. Do not buy into the fear-mongering tactics. Well, then in March, I was at a chiropractic seminar in Nebraska when President Trump declared a state of emergency, and all the chiros went berserk. I'm like, guys, this is our time right now to be the tip of the spear. This is our time to be proactive in this fight, to not give into this fear-mongering. I mean, Fred Barge wrote a book, Life Without Fear. He stated that fear is the fire that fuels the furnace of disease. Mm-hmm. Well, this was all leading up to the mask hearing and the mandate.
Yeah.
So in August of 2020, I missed the first mask hearing. We had a public hearing in Omaha, and I missed that first meeting. And I had a remorseful feeling, like I should have been there. I let my people down. All my patients, all these people, like, Dr. Tapper, why weren't you there? And I was like, I lost sleep over it. I had a busy schedule on Tuesday. It was in the afternoon. I'm like, I can't just take off work and reschedule everybody. And so the following Tuesday, I told my staff, block out my schedule. I'm going to be at that hearing because he had another open hearing. And this was even bigger because they extended the mask hearing. Now we're in the city council, and they literally had all these people there, filled to the brim. They had standing room, people standing. They had all these cameras there, and I kept praying, Lord, turn me into a lion. Turn me into a lion. I said, Lord, let these words travel far and wide. And I just kept praying that over and over and over. And we had to listen to this 5 hours of the pro-mask people, and they had all these doctors there that were there for the mask, and I was the only doctor there in opposition. And
that's wild.
And so they gave all these doctors all the time in the world to state their case. Some docs spoke for 35 minutes, and I kid you not. And it was all propaganda. And if I had all the time in the world, I would have went through how bogus this is and everything else. But they gave me 3 minutes, and before I spoke up there, I went to the restroom and I was just praying, like, Lord, give me the words, turn me into a lion. And I remember seeing this. I swear it was like a vision. It was like a daydreaming. I wasn't thinking about it. I went right into the restroom, and I could see David versus Goliath. And I went down into the courtroom, and my daughter put her hand on my leg, and she prayed for me. And my wife said, "You better know what you're getting yourself into, because look at all these cameras there." And I went and spoke. And I spoke very passionately with a lot of conviction. And then, I had 3 minutes. And even during that time, the president of the city council interrupted me and told me to keep myself in order. And I was like, I didn't even acknowledge him, because I knew he cut into my time. So I just spoke, and I didn't even care. I just went right past him. I spoke and I said what I had to say, and I went home. And that night, I put the kids to bed. And I made the mistake by looking at my phone, and I literally had this feeling like, oh my gosh, what did I do? It was insane. I don't know how many texts it came through, phone calls were coming through, and then my social media it looked like a slot machine. The notifications and the friend request, and I didn't even sleep that night. I kept looking at the phone, and it was just like and I kept watching the views and the shares, and it was just insane. And within
tell them about the in-laws the next
day. Yeah, so well, this wasn't the next day, but it was within 24 hours. That video had 3 million views, and got that prayer. It went all around the world. Just like BJ states, like, we never know how far reaching something we may think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. Well, I know what that quote means. It has a lot of significance. And it's like, if I can speak out, little BH Tapper, yahoo.com can speak out passionately. And I'm like, well, surely you can do it as well. And within 2 months of that speech going viral, I got labeled by the CCDH, which is the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is a international entity that is operating as a 501(c)(3) in the States as a nonprofit organization for countering digital hate. They labeled me hate speech, and they labeled me as one of the disinformation dozen that's responsible for 65% of the misinformation on vaccines. And I laugh and I say, I'll shoot for 100. But President Biden, the press secretary for Biden, called us out on national television and said that, we're killing people on national television. Well, then 3 days later, President Biden says we're killing people on national television. And they ran these global campaigns with our faces all over CNN.
Yeah, I remember seeing like the blocks with all 12.
Right.
Yeah.
And, my social media was reaching 3 to 4 million people a month at that time, and they wiped it clean. They seized my PayPal accounts and my Venmo accounts. They took our money. And, what Dr. Michael was talking about, how my in-laws.
Now let's pause right there. So what, for those listening that don't understand, you can probably find, I was trying to show it to my kids last night on YouTube or somewhere, trying to find the actual speech, but I could not find, I don't know if YouTube took it down or I could not find it, but I want to let everybody know that I've seen it, and it was a fight for freedom, for the ability to choose whether or not, and that's something one of the reasons we had Dr. Ben Tapper on today, is because, everyone has the right to choose whether or not they, just for instance, a prime example of that is my kids, a couple of them had a really hard time breathing, had a hard time functioning, doing anything with it was mandatory at school or wherever. And if I had it to do over again, that would have been a prime opportunity for myself to do exactly what Dr. Ben does. But, if enough people are willing, now they're coming back, we're seeing, this whole Dr. Fauci thing saying, oh, well, maybe the mask were not, the social distancing, all this stuff. Well, I didn't, now everybody's backtracking. Well, it's too late now. How many people were locked in their houses and couldn't get out, suffered from depression? How many people, suffered from anxiety and different things from wearing masks and different things that it's choice, that we have a freedom in this country to choose how we want to live. And that doesn't mean, see, the difference in this is I'm totally fine with them disagreeing. That's one of the things that's wrong today. You can disagree with Dr. Ben. You can disagree with the podcast. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that's the beauty of our country. We can agree to disagree. But when you say Dr. Ben is responsible for people dying, and Dr. Ben is because he says, hey, my freedom, freedom that I have in this country is to not wear a mask. Just like in the office, we didn't wear a mask. We didn't wear a mask during the whole COVID, and we didn't wear a mask because, Dr. Ben, we were trained in chiropractic school that the body is a self-healing, self-regulating organism, that God designed the body to be healthy, that healthy is normal, sick is abnormal, and then if your body's functioning at its optimum, germs don't make you sick. A weak host make you sick. Like, everybody got COVID. Everybody got it on them. Some people got COVID. Some people didn't. Some people's immune system couldn't fight it off, and they unfortunately passed away. And some people didn't. But the fact of the matter is, we cannot fault doctors, educated people, from saying, hey, you have a role to play in your health. You have a role as far as how to be healthy, how to stay healthy, how to have a strong immune system. It's not right. I mean, it's just not right.
Well, beautifully said. It goes back. This fight is bigger than most people realize. I'm thankful that
Yes.
COVID brought the truth to the forefront. I feel like the soil for truth is rich right now, and the people are starving for it. But we are repeating history. I mean, think of Abraham Lincoln said that if those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, we are, as chiropractors, we have a massive role to play to bring truth to the forefront, to take the reins of this mess. But again, what what made chiropractic sprout 100 years ago is the same soil today. But people are forgetting history, especially in the chiropractic realm. And I'm thankful that I'm sitting down with you guys here and colleagues of mine, because I wish more chiropractors were like-minded like this, because we had, I got a lot of flack from chiros in this fight. But again, they just forget history, because it was B.J. Palmer that wrote about the corruption during the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And, I have an article, and I don't think it was by coincidence, by accident that I got this article, but it's titled "A Few Fearful Physicians Force Funny Flu Frivolets for a Few Frenzied Folks." And he talked about how the Spanish flu was actually just a common cold that was weaponized by the media to funnel in an experimental influenza vaccine. And they had masks. You were not allowed to enter in the building unless you had a mask on. And BJ wrote a direct quote from BJ: "Does the mask stop influenza? Well, does a hog fence keep out mosquitoes?" And so we are forgetting history here. And so I had a lot of this conviction into this mess, and I have studied the history of vaccinations, and I realized, wow, we are being deceived on such a massive, massive, massive scale here, that it's not just psychological warfare, but this is spiritual warfare on the people. And so that, I feel like God really put me in a unique position. Like Esther 4:14, you were made for such a time as this. I felt in a unique position to really stand in the gap here and shine a light on this darkness. And, we have a massive opportunity to do so. As Christians, we should stand for injustice and stand for truth. We are to be the salt and light of the earth and not the sugar. And so we have to have that conviction. And I can't think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a pastor during Hitler's time, and he spoke out against Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Before Hitler even was in power, he was speaking out against his campaign and his people and said, "This is not good. This is evil." And they would cut the radio lines when he would go on and speak out against them. And censorship is evil in itself, just like what you said, Dr. Michael. We need to value freedom of speech, because if we don't have freedom of speech, then deaf and silent will be led like sheep to slaughter. And we have to value that amendment. We have to value that right. And, in Dietrich Bonhoeffer's time, there were 18,000 pastors. And 18,000 pastors during Hitler's time. And out of that 18,000, 12,000 pastors stayed quiet and compliant. They said, nope, this is not our time. We just need to fluff and love everybody and fluff our congregation and not speak out here like at Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's a loon. He's a crazy one. Okay. 3,000 out of the 18,000 joined the regime. They were afraid. They said, well, this is, we can't beat them. We're going to join them. Okay. Well, then the other 3,000 were like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. They said, nope, we're going to stand in the gap. This is not right, no matter what, and we're going to lay our lives down on here. Okay. Well, that's what happened. They laid their lives down for the truth, for what they believed in, for righteousness' sake, and they were persecuted for it. But what does the Bible say when we face persecution, when we face trials, many trials? Consider it great joy when we face those trials, when we stand in the gap for the truth's sake, for righteousness' sake. And God, I believe, cares about the truth. I believe he cares about this because people were being lied to. And God hates, what does he hate? He despises lies. He hates lying. And I do believe that this is a battle that is between good and evil. And it's not just hey, you should have the freedom and right to just, buckle your seatbelt or whatever. This is so much bigger than that. This is so much bigger than what most people realize.
Yeah, I was watching an interview last night, the interview you did on television, and I thought it was just exceptional. You could tell the reporter was kind of appalled that you would take a stand, and you said, my conviction is bigger than my, what was it? My conviction is bigger than my complacency.
So, that is kind of stems from a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands at times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. It really goes back to, I always say my convictions are greater than my complacency, because I feel like, Edmund Burke stated that the only thing for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, to be complacent, and God, I believe, hates conformity to the world, right? He wants conformity to him. We need to conform to his word and to him and be Christ-like. But conformity means that we're doing what everybody else is doing, regardless to what is right, and regardless to what our convictions are. So that's why I say we need to have convictions that are greater than our complacency, convictions that are greater than our fear of persecution. And what would it look like if we had men who feared nothing but God, who hated nothing but sin, and were determined to know nothing but Jesus Christ and him crucified? We would set the world on fire. Right? Where are those men? Where are those men? Yeah. And again, we need to have that conviction back to the forefront here, and have conviction over our complacency, because we are at a time right now in a crossroads in this world where complacency and conformity is being preached in our churches, and they have become the sugar, not the salt and the light.
Yes.
Unfortunately, and I'll let Caroline go here. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but unfortunately, I'm a very positive thinker. It is my belief system that we're going to have another chance. I don't think that we've seen the last of, oh my gosh, this XYZ thing that's out now is you better run for the hills. And I'm just telling you that, in my heart, down in my gut, I had the same feeling about COVID. Not that it wasn't serious, not that it wasn't real, not that I'm ignorant, but I had a feeling of, listen, this is an opportunity for me as a chiropractor to live out 29 years. it's like my wife said, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to do the same thing we've been doing for
Amen.
28 years, some odd years.
Right.
I started,
And
dude,
it's,
I was
I
doing
think the other part of that is not only, Dr. Ben, are you sitting here and you're speaking truth out to everyone, and then yet the government, mainstream media, everybody else, they're trying to say, oh, no way, this is disinformation. He's the one, spewing lies, killing people, when in fact, it was the exact opposite. Not only is the government and mainstream media the ones that are censoring anybody that doesn't go along with their narrative, but they're pushing out data that is like, even for me, who I am not a doctor, if I just look and research minimal from what I know, you can tell that it's been tampered with and messed with, that this is not adding
Right.
up. And so the second part of that is what you all are saying is not only do we need chiropractors and doctors to be speaking out, but we have got to have these moms and dads. I was so baffled during COVID with the lack of parents that were not going to these school board meetings, and that we're not just, you don't have to be defensive about it, but you can at least be bold enough to just ask a question as far as, why are we doing this? This is not making sense. Can I please see, the data or the evidence to back up your claim as to why our kids need to stay home for a year, or, they need to wear masks. And so what was it? I mean, I'm sure it was your faith and your relationship with Jesus, but what can you tell others, especially right now? Hey, this is what really helped me to step out and be bold in my faith and my convictions, to where, if something like this starts coming down the pipeline again, that they feel like, what, it's my time. Like Dr. Michael said, I need to be the one of these people to speak out the next time.
Well, it helped me tremendously that I knew the truth. Knowing the truth really gave me the convictions, because I've been in this fight for a very long time. And that's why I think that's why I said this whole thing is spiritual, because the things that along the line, seeing God's hand in all of this, prior to 2020, things he gave me, and things that he, the information that I would receive, and just I feel like Jonah, I didn't really want to keep going about the vaccine thing. I didn't want to learn about vaccine. I didn't want to learn, but I felt like I had to. I just had this innate desire to just really dive into the whole vaccine realm. And I would put on vaccine lectures to this. And so I would just know the truth. And I researched the polymerase chain reaction test, the PCR test. That was the main diagnostic test for COVID.
Yes.
And I would, in my free time, I would research and reach out and talk and have these conversations. And I just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And that led me to have that knowledge, to belief, the know-how, to the knowing full well that this was not truth. This was not from the Lord, and really having a good support group too, because some of my best friends kind of disowned me during the pandemic. A lot of my close family disowned me, and even in my church, they disowned me, a lot of people. And again, and I questioned, am I doing this right thing? But I would seek the Lord. I wasn't seeking man's approval. And even in Galatians, in chapter 1, I believe it talks about, what is the verse? Let me just read it here. I just read it the other night with my wife. And so it's the last, one of the last verses in, let's see here. Basically, if I was, where's it at? If I was to get the approval of man, I wouldn't be Christ's servant, basically. That's the verse. It's in chapter 1 of Galatians, but it's basically, I'm not here to seek approval of men. I'm here to do the will of God. And that's where my conviction, too, was coming from. But just diving into his word and his presence. Again, this battle might not be your battle, but, and obviously there are other people have giants in their life that we need to tackle. But, this was one for me. And again, I have to just give credit where credit's due. I sought the Lord, and I feel like he gave me the conviction to do that.
Yeah. And throughout, the pandemic, COVID, we can sit here and talk all day about the negatives that came from all of that. But what would you say were some
Mm.
positives that you saw that came out
Yeah.
of that time
Oh,
period?
well, it's a heavy burden to carry a lot of this information. A lot of the information, especially in the vaccine realm, I carried a heavy burden
Mhm.
because I just felt like we were being gaslighted. We weren't being
Yes.
listened to. And so one of the greatest joys now is having these conversations like, oh, people are listening. We have the ear of the people. I mean, people are finally coming around to this topic and we have a voice and people are listening. So thank the Lord for that. Not are we going to convert
Mhm.
everybody, or is everybody in the world going to listen?
Sure.
No, but I do believe that more people are listening and coming around to this topic than ever before, and so I'm very, very thankful for that. And so I prayed for many years, like, Lord, shine the light on this industry, shine the light on this, and I feel
Mhm.
like He's answering that prayer.
That's so great. I just echo that. Being a chiropractor for 28 years and educating patients, and I remember coming out. I'm 24 years old, opened up a practice here in Morristown. I don't know anybody, and I'm doing these. I grew up at DE, and yeah, it is different. The chiropractic lifestyle. So here I am teaching on, you don't have to vaccinate, and this is 28 years ago, dude. Like people were just looking at
Mm-hmm.
me like, are you for real? Like I would have, they're like, you can't even go to school without being vaccinated, and I think that's what we're talking about. Now it is nothing for a patient to come in my office and go, hey, where do you get those forms for not
Mm-hmm.
vaccinating? Now this is
Yeah.
28 years down the road, but I was crazy
Right.
then. Crazy to even, I even had like my church say, I don't know if Gage can be in the little daycare area because he don't have his vaccines and my kids do. So, there was talk of that stuff. And so it just goes to show like it's not that I want to go out and tell everybody, hey, live your life like I did, but I want you to know there's a
Amen.
choice. You have a freaking
Right.
choice. You have a choice to say, hey, I'm going to look and see, oh, there's 38 vaccines today. There was 7 when I was a kid. I'm going to look and go, oh, that comes this vaccine they pulled from aborted
Mm-hmm.
feces. And so it's just like we gotta know like exactly what we're doing before
Right.
we do it. And that's the thing is like that's the point. So if you're listening to this and the whole goal is the podcast, we're going to have different guests and different people. But I want you to think. We want you to know that hey, you have choices. Like some people have kids and they don't even know that getting half the vaccines are an option. Getting 2/3 of the vaccines are an option. Getting none of the vaccines are an option. Like they don't even know
Mm-hmm.
that because it's not told
Right.
to them. The doctor says we will see you in 6 months for the vaccine. And then some doctors, what if I don't want to do that? Well, then you can't be a
Right.
patient here. You know? So I'm just saying like it's not
Mm-hmm.
tolerated.
Right.
So, when I praise the Lord raising 4 kids who weren't, Gage went and got a COVID test so he could fly. And when he went, they said, he was 22. You've never been to the hospital your entire life? And they thought he was an alien. Gage goes, no, I've never had to go. He goes, who's your primary care provider? And he goes, my dad. And he goes, who's that? He's a chiropractor. But just the fact that that's even
Mm-hmm.
possible, and it's not because chiropractic is great, it's because God
Amen.
is great. And like I said before, it's not that we're out here trying to say it's the only way, but it is
Mm-hmm.
possible. It is a way to raise your kids where they exercise, eat right, have a good attitude, follow God, read the Word, and eat correctly, and live a life without drugs and surgery. And so, dude, it's been more than an honor. We don't want to take up too much of your time. Caroline, did you have one more question you want to ask him on the way
I
out?
did, yes. So if we can go from COVID pandemic, life, I'm sure, was more than crazy. You probably don't even have the words to put it to, but to now. How has life changed for you and your family? Where are you at now? What does that look
Yeah.
like in the middle of
Well,
2024?
that's a great question. So 2 years ago, I sold my clinic. Um, it was right in the heat of the pandemic. I was fighting the fight. I was working
Mm-hmm.
harder outside of the office, trying to bring truth to the people. In the office, we had a
Mm-hmm.
wait list. And some docs were like, "Oh, you're just a bad business person if you have a wait list." And I'm like, "Well, I was a one-man band. I didn't have bandwidth to hire another doc. I was at max capacity in my schedule. I physically couldn't see any more people." And so I felt like God, I needed a sabbatical. I needed a break. So I sold the clinic,
Yeah.
and I just basically took a year off. We traveled. I got asked to speak at the Defeat the Mandates in LA with Bobby Kennedy and Steve Kirsch. And
It's
I had dinner
amazing.
with Bobby Kennedy um, that night.
Mm.
And it was kind of a surreal moment, like, wow, you're Bobby Kennedy. And he knew who I was. And he asked me, basically pulled me aside and said, "Hey, how did this disinformation doesn't list affect you?" Because he got labeled disinformation doesn't as well.
Right.
And I said, "Well, this is what happened." And he said he basically gave me a cell number and said, "Hey, just text me your email." And so
Mm.
and he asked me to be a plaintiff in his lawsuit against the Trusted News Initiative. And
Wow.
so we've been in a massive legal battle to fight for our rights here and freedoms against the TNI. And so that's been a real ongoing battle. And we're actually just entering another lawsuit. It's going to be very, very costly. And we're trying to raise funds to fight this because it is, again, for our freedoms and our rights here. We're going against the government,
Mm-hmm.
and which is not an easy task. We're trying
Right.
to protect our rights and freedoms. So the fight continues. But again, I am focusing, on what's important because I can get very caught up in this fight, and it can
Mm.
steal our joy. Um, but
Sure.
I'm very thankful. So it has to be a really a mind shift and just
Yes.
our heart right with God and make sure to put Him and make sure we acknowledge Him in our ways and He sets our path straight. But I am practicing and I am spending every time I can with my family and enjoying the present because this is a journey, and try not to be distracted by uh, the things that take our joy. But yeah, but that's where I'm
Mm-hmm.
at right now currently. So fighting the good fight, still speaking as much as we can, and just and really living that legacy.
And so, how can, if somebody is in the Omaha, Nebraska area and wants to get in touch with you, if somebody wants to help, if you all are, looking for ways that people can contribute to you all fighting and working with that lawsuit, what are some ways that people can get in touch with you and help with everything that you have
Yeah, I
going
mean, we
on?
need all the funds we can get to fight this. I mean, I'm trying to raise 50,000 just in the next 3 weeks here, because that's
Mm.
what the retainer fee is, just to sue the government, basically, for these attorneys. And so, I mean, if you want, you can donate to our GoFundMe. We have a GoFundMe. It's on my Facebook page, my Instagram. We
Okay.
also GoFundMe is kind of a tyrannical fundraiser, so I think we're going to launch because they raise funds through the truckers, uh, and then
Right. And then they
they froze all the
froze.
funds. So I'm
Yeah.
not too confident with GoFundMe, but if you want people that are
Right.
listening, if you want to help support us, you can mail checks right to the office. That'd be amazing. And you don't need to do that. You can just, but if you feel like God's calling you to help us, that'd be great. Again, this is for our children's children. This is for our rights and freedoms. And
Yes.
this is really the ultimate goal is to put an amendment into our Constitution that allows for medical freedom. That's what
Mm.
Benjamin Rush, the son of our Declaration of Independence, he promoted and he pushed because he had the foresight to see that there would be a day when medical tyranny is at our doorstep, and that is today. And so they are
Yes.
knocking at our door, and if we stay complacent, we're going to let them in the door.
Yeah.
Mm.
So true.
And just so everybody knows, the reason it's not already in there is because they didn't think we were dumb enough to know that that was a given.
Right?
Your health is given to you by God, and you should be able to choose how you want to live and the way you want to live. And I know too that you are just spending all kinds of time and effort into this fight, and I want you to know that we are praying for you. I'll make sure that the Revolution family knows that as well, and we're so we're just blessed to be able to practice
Amen.
chiropractic and to be able to share the principle that God designed your body to be healthy, and that created the body in His image. And so it's just thank you
Yes.
from the bottom of our hearts for fighting so we can do what we love to do every day. And thank you for taking the time out today to be with us on Coffee with the Chiro, and we'll continue to pray for you. We want you to try to make it to Nashville November 1st and 2nd if you can.
That'd be amazing.
It'll be Nashville, just so you can come, and for no other reason than obviously you always have a microphone there, but really I think it would be just a good season for you to just come and sit and soak and be sown into, and so you can be around people who love the Lord and love their family and love chiropractic. So I want to personally invite you to come, and if there's any way that we can help you and your family get down there for that, would be awesome. So thank you, Dr. Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Michael and Caroline. Thanks so much. That seminar you guys had when we went to the last time, that was one of my favorite seminars. And I feel like we need physical rest, absolutely, but we need that spiritual rest too. And I feel like that seminar was good for me. So just being around you guys, and Dr. Michael, I'm still waiting for that invite to go duck hunting. So you let me know.
Oh, it's coming. Well, I'll go ahead and share with you now. I don't have to wait on my brother anymore. I took the liberty last year of buying some duck hunting property here in East Tennessee.
Oh,
So yeah, so we had our first season last year. So I mean, you can go west. There's a Chiro duck hunt over there, G2G, which would be great. They're a sponsor for us. We love them, but also, I mean, you got a little east option now. East Tennessee option.
Yeah.
Flying to Knoxville, see Dr. Pete, Dr. Matt. So I'll see what I can do to get you on that list.
That'd be great.
For sure.
I've never been duck hunting, but I've been deer hunting and pheasant hunting, but the duck hunting's it's on my bucket list. So.
No, for sure, dude. We got to have a duck hunting podcast. I'm still waiting for it.
Oh gosh, in the duck blind, we could do round 2, y'all.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining.
Dr. Ben.
Thank you so
guys
much.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys. God bless now.